Freedom Reigns Radio Network is not responsible for the views and opinions of the guests or hosts of this show. The views and opinions expressed in this show are strictly the views and opinions of guests or hosts of this program.
Hello all, welcome to our Thursday night broadcast, Community and the Constitution. Boy, what a week. Busy out there, turning the soil, taking care of the garden, getting things to grow. I hope you guys have been doing the same. Really need to focus, gang. If the price sticker shock isn't getting to you, it will soon. Just checking the chat rooms, watching everybody's just popping in. Hello, everybody. Glad you could make it in both the chats. We're going to be able to kick back here for a minute. I've been trying to, for the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to play this one audio clip, and we just keep getting sidetracked and running out of time or something like that. So tonight, before we go even in any other topics or do anything else, I'm going to play this darn thing. It's about 35 minutes long. It's done by Judge Napolitano, and it's titled Constitution for Dummies. We'll be back.
The creation of the American Republic, with its written constitution and guarantees of personal, natural liberty, is the greatest political accomplishment in the history of the Western world. Unfortunately, almost from the very beginning of the creation of the Republic, those elected to preserve the Constitution began to dismantle it. In virtually every administration, from George Washington to George W. Bush, the government has sought ingenious ways to evade and avoid its obligations under our founding charter. But a little bit of background first. When we were colonists and the king and the parliament wanted to raise money, one of the ways they did it was by the use of the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act required of colonists, not of people in the motherland, that they have on every official piece of paper in their home, every book, every pamphlet, every deed, every mortgage, every lease, even a poster to be nailed to a tree, the king's stamp, which bore an image of the king. Question: how did the king's government know if you had his image on your papers in your house? Answer: Parliament enacted the Writs of Assistance Act, a damnable piece of legislation that allowed British soldiers to write their own search warrants. So a British soldier could show up at your front door and authorize himself in writing to examine the contents of your home, your barn, your property, ostensibly looking for the king's stamps. Of course, if they happen to find rum imported from the islands without a tax stamp on it, or furniture that had been imported from Great Britain, and you couldn't prove the tax was paid on it, the rum and the furniture would be seized and put away. The Stamp Act and the Writs of Assistance Act were among the last straws. In fact, the Stamp Act was so controversial that Parliament eventually rescinded it in an effort to quell the uproar on this side of the pond, but it didn't work. We wrote a Declaration of Independence. The great Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence with some editing from some of his political enemies, but it stands for the affirmation of the natural rights of human beings, because it says we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among them is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We fought a revolution, we won the revolution, we wrote the Constitution. The whole purpose of the Constitution is to keep the government in check, to divide and diffuse power between the states and the central government, and further divide it and check it within the federal government itself. much of the planning and the ideas behind the Constitution came from Greek and Latin and Roman and to a certain extent even British experience. In the summer of 1787, in a swampy area of the city of brotherly love, the Founding Fathers debated, where do our rights come from? Jefferson, who was not there, Madison, who was there, argued that our rights come from our humanity, and our humanity is a gift from God, and that rights like freedom of speech and freedom of the press and freedom of association and freedom of travel and freedom of thought and freedom to develop your personality and the right to privacy are natural human rights that are as natural to us as the fingers on the ends of our hands. That because God is perfectly free and because we are created in His image and likeness, He imbued in each and every one of us the same natural desires for and right to freedom that He has. Hamilton and Adams, the big government guys, said that's a lot of baloney because you can't have rights without a government to protect them. You only have the rights that the government lets you have. And our rights, therefore, come from the government. They don't come from our nature. It's clear from reading the document, the Constitution, that it is intended by the language in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments which were added in the next 3 or 4 years, that it is Jefferson and Madison who carried the day, that the whole purpose of the document is to guarantee that our rights exist. Example, the First Amendment doesn't say the government shall give you freedom of speech. It says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. This presumes that freedom of speech pre-exists Congress and it came from somewhere else, from our humanity. But none of this was new. The one thing that was new about the Constitution is the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment, which Justice Brandeis said is the right to be left alone, the greatest right of all the rights in civilized society, the right most valued by human beings. Today we call it the right to privacy. Here's what it means. It means that the government can't come and break down your door in the middle of the night like in the banana republics. It must go to a judge, and it must present to a neutral judge what the document, what the Fourth Amendment calls probable cause, a phrase meaning it is more likely than not that in that house where we want to seize that person or that document, there is evidence of a crime. So no matter how guilty is the government's target, the Fourth Amendment puts a neutral judge between the government and the target. No matter who the target is, no matter what the target has done, no matter how guilty is the target, no matter how widespread is the belief in the guilt of the target, no matter how accurate is the belief in the guilt of the target, no matter how much the society fears the target, the government must go through a neutral judge before it can get to that target. Unfortunately, we have allowed the government a monopoly on the use of force in our society. The Fourth Amendment regulates that monopoly because no one could be trusted with the power to use unregulated force. And it is the Fourth Amendment that was intended forever to keep us from becoming what our cousins in Eastern Europe would become at the end of World War II. Now, almost from the very beginning, we'll give George Washington a break. He had enough to do setting up the basic guidelines. In the administration of John Adams, remember the contested election? They didn't run on tickets in those days. The president was John Adams. He was the biggest of the big government guys. The vice president was Thomas Jefferson. They didn't agree on anything. Adams defeated Jefferson for president in the Electoral College, and the original Constitution said the number one person becomes president, the number two becomes vice president. Adams thought there was too much freedom in the United States. The country was 8 years old when the Adams administration enacted the Alien and Sedition Acts, which, among other things, made it a crime punishable by 2 years in jail to criticize or to demean in public the President, members of the President's cabinet, or members of Congress. Note who was omitted from its protections. The Vice President. They were happy to have TJ criticize all he could tolerate. And unfortunately, we laugh about it now, it's such a historical abomination. Unfortunately, the federal government actually prosecuted people, and juries convicted them, and judges incarcerated them for doing what we broke away from England to have the right to do: criticize or demean the government. That is the first serious assault on civil liberties waged in a formal way by the government. I'm not talking about a runaway sheriff or a crazy FBI agent or a goofy U.S. Marshal or someone who should never have been given the shield and the gun of the government. I'm talking about the power of the federal government aimed and targeted who would criticize it. When Jefferson became president and it expired, that is the Alien and Sedition Acts, he basically said, don't even send it to my desk because I'm not going to sign a renewal. He didn't have to say that because by then the anti-federalists, those who believed that our rights were natural, those who believed that the states were sovereign, those who believed that the federal government only had the 17, count them, 17 specific, discrete, unique, precise powers that the Constitution gave it. So by Jefferson saying to people of that mindset, don't send me the Alien and Sedition Acts, it was redundant. He wasn't going to sign it, and they weren't going to send it to him. It expires during his presidency in 1805. My friend Bob Higgs has written a great book called The Warfare State, in which he argues that war is the health of the state, that in times of war, the government gets stronger because we let it do so. The next massive assault on civil liberties comes during the Civil War. Now, I come not to talk about Lincoln. I could talk about him for a month, about the massive violations of the Constitution. When one of Gillespie's people interviewed me and asked me, who is the greatest violator of the Constitution? I said, George W. Bush has shown less fidelity to the Constitution than any president since Abraham Lincoln. And they said, Lincoln? And I said, yes, Lincoln. Lincoln slaughtered 650,000 Americans. Where's the power to do that in the Constitution? Lincoln locked up editors of newspapers in the North, not in the South that was rebelling, but in the North because they criticized him. Lincoln had soldiers break down the door of the house of a Republican congressman from Ohio, Clement Vallandigham, because Vallandigham called Lincoln a monster and a tyrant, which he was, and had him banished to Canada for the balance of the Civil War. And of course, Lincoln, never mind what his soldiers did to women in the South, never mind what they did to banks and courthouses in the South that burnt them down, Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Well, habeas corpus has been around since 1215. Since King John reluctantly signed the Magna Carta, he agreed that no matter how powerful the government and no matter how awful its target, the target could always compel the government to bring the target before a neutral judge and justify the target's incarceration. Lincoln, on a whim and by himself, suspended that. In the First World War, the Congress enacted the Espionage Acts. The Espionage Acts, one of which is still extant, makes it a crime to discourage workers in munitions plants from going to work. Hey, Dad, you don't look so good today. Stay home. I'm really saying that because I'm against the war and I want a few thousand fewer bullets manufactured today. A guy by the name of Abe Gitlow is the first target of the government in a very, very famous case because he distributed leaflets that he printed by himself in a tenement in the Lower East Side of Manhattan in which he encouraged munitions workers not to go to work. The leaflets were written in Yiddish. and Mr. Gitlow served 10 years in a federal prison for dropping them out of his window from a Lower East Side tenement. When Alberto Gonzales threatened the New York Times about a year and a half ago, he cited the Espionage Act because it is still a law in your country's law books and mine that would permit the government to prosecute someone who encouraged workers not to produce what the government needs for war. What part of Congress shall make no law did they not understand? In World War II, of course, we had FDR. Put aside the socialist monstrosity that he visited upon us, which is everywhere around this building. He locked up 10,000 Italian Americans and 110,000 Japanese Americans. Not Japanese from Japan or Italians from Italy, but people born in the United States as American as he was because of their ancestry. And the Supreme Court permitted him to do so. His argument was that they were a security threat. So they lost their homes. They were separated from their families. They lost their businesses. They never saw a judge. They never saw a jury. They had no charges preferred against them. Does this sound familiar? He hadn't yet coined the phrase enemy combatant. But they were locked up for the remainder of the war, starting in mid-1942. In 1980, a Republican president, strike that, in 1988, a Republican president and a Democratic Congress would enact the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which Ronald Reagan happily signed. It condemned the wartime incarcerations of FDR. It declared that it is the policy of the American government never to incarcerate someone on the basis of their race or their religion or their national ancestry. It provided financial compensation for those who were still living. $20,000, big deal, but it was something, and there weren't too many still living. It was the first public apology the government made, and typical of the government, it took it 45 years to apologize for one of the most blatant, obvious violations of human liberty, because a cowed Supreme Court went along with it. Now, all of this brings us into the modern era. While all of this is happening, the Fourth Amendment is still being enforced, meaning, for the most part, if the government wants information about you or from you, it must go to a judge and present evidence of probable cause of a crime. And if the judge agrees, I used to take these applications myself in the living room of my home at 3:30 in the morning. And sometimes they wouldn't tell me everything I needed to know, and I said, goodbye, guys, I'm not signing this search warrant. And sometimes I found out weeks and even years later that they didn't tell me everything, and then I signed documents to invalidate the search warrant that I signed in my home 2 years earlier at 3:30 in the morning. For the most part, this system of following the Fourth Amendment worked, and the government followed it. Until 1977, under the administration of Jimmy Carter, when the country is reeling from Watergate and disgusted with Nixon, and the Congress wants to do something about it. So the Congress wrote the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. You hear about this every day today by its acronym, FISA, F-I-S-A. FISA said that if the target is an agent of a foreign government, then you don't need the probable cause of a crime that the Fourth Amendment required. It's 200 years after the Fourth Amendment becomes law, and the government is officially wearing away at it. It says you only need probable cause that the target is an agent of a foreign government. But even this Congress, disrespectful of the Fourth Amendment as it was, and even Jimmy Carter, as big as he was into big government, nevertheless recognized if some evidence was obtained under one of these FISA warrants, it couldn't be used in a criminal prosecution because it was obtained inconsistent with the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment requires probable cause of a crime. FISA requires probable cause that the target is an agent of a foreign government. Once FISA issues the warrant, then the government can listen to the conversation of the foreign agent. Example, if it turns out that the janitor in the Soviet embassy is really a spy who beats his wife. He cannot be prosecuted for domestic violence because the information was obtained from a FISA warrant, inconsistent with the Constitution, and he can't be prosecuted for espionage because the information was obtained from a FISA warrant, inconsistent with the Constitution. The only thing the government could do is deport him. In 1978, not satisfied with the lessening of the probable cause standard, the Congress enacted something called the Right to Financial Privacy Act. Well, you know what's coming. You know the way the government names these statutes. If it has the word privacy in it, bet the mortgage you're going to lose some privacy. The Right to Financial Privacy Act brought us full circle to the Writs of Assistance Act, because this abominable statute permits government agents to write their own search warrants and to serve them on financial institutions. The target is limited to a financial institution, and the custodian of the financial institution must tell you about it. So if an FBI agent decides to write a self-written search warrant on the bank where Nick Gillespie deposits his billions, the bank would be required to say, hey, Nick, there's a guy here. He's from the FBI. He gave us a self-written search warrant. We're going to comply with it in about 10 days. But you have 10 days to challenge it, to go to a judge and say, what is this nonsense about a self-written search warrant? I have my Fourth Amendment rights. That was the rule set down in the Financial Privacy Act. But even the big government people who disrespected the Constitution, who hated the Fourth Amendment, who wrote the Right to Financial Privacy Act, understood that any evidence obtained from one of these self-written search warrants could not be used in a prosecution against the target, in my hypothetical, the great and the wonderful and the handsome and the devilish. You want me to keep going? Nick Gillespie. Because the evidence was obtained on less than probable cause of a crime, it was obtained inconsistent with the Fourth Amendment. All of this sets the table for 9/11. Now, wherever you were on 9/11, you cannot forget or underestimate or overstate the catastrophe that occurred to the 3,000 human beings that died, to the American psyche, to our feeling that we are free and will always be free and no one can take our freedom away, to the government and to the Constitution. Because the government's initial reaction was to author the most abominable piece of legislation since the Alien and Sedition Acts, with the most unlikely of names, the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act is the most dastardly direct assault on human liberty and on guaranteed rights in the Constitution that the Congress ever enacted since the Alien and Sedition Acts 200 years earlier. The Patriot Act was enacted with no debate on the floor of the House of Representatives. Ask your member of Congress how much time he or she spent reading the Patriot Act. I've read it. I've read it twice. It's 315 pages long. But in order to read it, you must have with you and in front of you the entire United States Criminal Code, because the Patriot Act doesn't read like a novel or like a nation of sheep. The Patriot Act says, on page 362, change the semicolon to a comma. On page 467, change the word or to and. Change 15 to 10. So in order to read this, I'm just giving you hypotheticals here, you must insert the language from the Patriot Act into the many, many volumes of the United States Criminal Code before you can actually figure out what the Patriot Act says. The Patriot Act was posted on the House of Representatives intranet. That's their internal intranet that only members of Congress and their senior staff have access to. And the House members were told they had 15 minutes to vote on this dastardly assault on human liberty. Well, what did the Patriot Act do? Why am I so animated about it, whether there was debate or not? Nobody in the House read it. 2 members of the Senate read it. One of them is dead. Congressman Paul Wellstone said he read it. He's dead. Senator Russ Feingold has stated publicly that he read it. The 2 people that read it, of course, voted against it. Nobody else read it in its entirety. The Patriot Act allows the FBI, your FBI, those men and women sworn to protect the Constitution, to invade your home while you're at a basketball game or a football game on a Saturday afternoon or church on a Sunday morning and make it look like it was a robbery. Well, what is this? You call the local police and say, my house has been broken into. The last people in the world you would suspect would do that would be your local FBI, but they can do it. And they can plant a listening device on your bedpost or under your kitchen table or in your shower or anywhere in your house that they want without taking anything. By the way, if they want, they could also take your checkbook because they may want financial information about you and you not knowing that you have it. And if they serve one of those self-written search warrants under the Patriot Act on your bank, let's continue with our hypothetical. Now, after October 15, 2001, send a self-written search warrant. No judge is involved. Forget about the Fourth Amendment, the President has said. It takes too much time. Too much time to preserve human liberty. Too much time to remember these are natural rights, as natural as the fingers on the ends of our hands. But the Patriot Act says if the self-written search warrant is served on Gillespie's bank, it is a crime for the bank to tell him. Well, wait a minute. What about the First Amendment that says Congress shall make no law? What about the Fourth Amendment that says if you want evidence from someone, you got to go to a judge? The Patriot Act wipes that out. Not only may the evidence be used, remember Carter and his buddies when they wrote FISA, when they wrote the Right to Financial Privacy Act in 77 and 78, says right in the statute, can't be used as evidence in a criminal case. The Patriot Act says whatever is obtained from one of these self-written search warrants must be used as the first time I've seen it in any statute I've ever read, must be admitted as competent evidence in a criminal case. So the Patriot Act brings us full circle from the reasons for which, at least the last straw about which, we broke away from the mother country. The King and the Parliament told the British soldiers they could write their own search warrants and use the fruits of those warrants against us in a criminal prosecution. And the Congress has told not just the FBI, but all federal agents that they can write their own search warrants, serve them on a financial institution, use the evidence obtained against you, and make it a crime for the financial institution to tell you. It's even a crime for the custodian, the person at the financial institution, to tell anyone that he or she has received a self-written search warrant. So the banker can't tell her husband, her lawyer, her significant other, a priest in the confessional booth, can't even tell a judge in a federal court. That's why these challenges, when there are challenges, are always John Doe or Mary Roe versus John Ashcroft or Alberto Gonzalez. Because if you file a complaint with your real name on it, 5 years in a federal prison. And the evidence is right there. You broke the law. You revealed that an FBI agent knocked on your door and handed you a self-written search warrant. Even the Patriot Act, however, as abominable as it is, limited the targets of self-written search warrants to financial institutions. Now, 2 years later, on December 13, 2003, a day in which everyone in this room will remember where she or he was, the President signed an innocuous-sounding, long, boring financial document into law, the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal 2004. Basically, this act provides appropriations from the General Treasury for the 16 intelligence agencies that we know about and the 2,000 intelligence agencies that we don't know about. I'm laughing. If we don't know about them, how would we know there's 2,000? We don't know what we don't know. Sounds a little Rumsfeldian, doesn't it? Tucked into the Intelligence Authorization Act for 2004 is a definition that would have made George Orwell proud. Remember FISA. Remember the Right to Financial Privacy Act. Remember even the Patriot Act. The target must always be a financial institution. So this abomination that the President signed into law on December 13, 2003, defines financial institution as follows: a bank, a trust company, a credit union. So far, okay. A delicatessen, a bodega, a restaurant, a hotel, a casino, a travel agency. Your lawyer's office, your doctor's office, your telephone company, your computer server, and that great financial institution to which we will all repose our fortunes, the post office. So think about how Orwellian this is. The first three statutes say your target can only be a financial institution. This statute redefines financial institution to mean just about everything under the sun except your home. So now if an FBI agent or a federal agent from any of the federal agencies shows up with a self-written search warrant, they can read your mail before you do. They can see your medical records from your doctor, your HMO, your hospital, your pharmacist. They can find out what you ate at a restaurant, what you purchased at a supermarket, what you read that came in your mail. All of this without you ever knowing anything about it, and all of this without a federal judge ever involved. Whatever became of the right to be left alone? Oh, and December 13, 2003, why did the President sign it on that day? Because he knew that something happened 10,000 miles away which would so dominate and captivate the front pages that no one would notice this redefinition of the term financial institution until months, and he hoped years later. It was the day we captured Saddam Hussein. Who the heck is going to read a statute when that's dominating the headlines? It was actually a clerk for some federal agency discovered this and thought it was a mistake and put it on the wire services January 29th, a month and a half later, and we all read it and realized the monstrosity. How did your representatives in the Congress vote on this statute? You'll never know, because it was a voice vote. Assault the Constitution, even read what you're enacting. Change the natural meaning of human words. Don't even record your vote on it, as if all of this isn't bad enough. In December of 2006, after they knew they had lost majorities in both houses of Congress, the Republicans and the President, with the complicity of some Democrats, enacted the Military Commissions Act of 2006. One would think that if one is tried for a crime and acquitted, found not guilty, one would be freed. The Military Commissions Act of 2006 gives the President of the United States power that even the great dictators of the 20th century never claimed to have, and that is the right to continue incarceration even after acquittal. Good God, how low have we let the government sink? I have called this book A Nation of Sheep because we act like sheep when we let the government steal our freedoms regularly, consistently, systematically, and repeatedly without even uttering a cry in protest. Now, not everything is lost. I don't want to ruin your appetites. There's a nice dinner about to come. Who has saved us from some of this? Believe it or not, those people who rail against activist judges should stop the railing. When the president said he could lock someone up and declare them an enemy combatant and throw away the key, not bring that person before a judge, not charge that person with a crime, not let them talk to a lawyer, not prosecute them, not give themselves a chance to defend themselves, the Supreme Court, by a vote of 8-1, said no, you can't do that in this country. When the president's advisors said, take those bad guys to Guantanamo Bay, it's Cuba. It's not the United States. The criminal laws don't apply. You can torture and maim and do whatever you want. The treaties don't apply. The Constitution doesn't apply. And best of all, Mr. President, those pesky federal judges leave you alone because they don't have jurisdiction over Cuba. The Supreme Court rejected that argument by a vote of 6-3. The Military Commissions Act of 2006 also took a lesson from Abe Lincoln. Because, you see, if the government swoops you up and you end up in Guantanamo Bay where there's no jury and no independent judge and no right to look at all of the evidence against you, you have no right to habeas corpus. You cannot challenge the jailer and force the jailer to justify under the Constitution, a natural right that everyone in the Anglo-American world has had since 1215. Now, why has this happened? I suspect that it has happened because Americans are afraid. I think that FDR was one of the great socialists of all time, but during World War II, he preached hope and not fear. He preached that freedom would prevail. The administration that sits a couple of blocks from where we are now intimidates and scares and uses state secrets and secret evidence and shares it with members of Congress. And after they've looked at this stuff, and God knows what it is, they come out and they vote to destroy the Constitution. Where is freedom? Freedom is in our hearts. If it dies there, forget it. No judge, no speech, no book, no cable TV, no legislature is going to bring it back. But if it lives in our hearts, no government can for very long keep it away. God love you.
Welcome back, everyone. We've learned more history and truth about the Constitution in the last 36 minutes than probably did with 4 years of high school. And I want you all to think about that. And it's something that you can find it over there on YouTube. It's Constitution for Dummies by Judge Napolitano. And play it over again. Really listen to it. You know, look up the cases he's referring to, the information he's giving us. You know, it's sometimes, you know, especially with law and packs the information and stuff, you know, you get a little taste of something, but you just have to dig a little bit deeper to really fully understand everything that's taken place. But right now, though, we're going to take a short break here while everybody's absorbing that material. When we come back, we're going to touch on a couple of the topics that were brought up in the chat room during that broadcast. And we're back. Yes, I'll grow my own. Thank you very much. Don't need you, big brother. You ain't worth the... Well, I ain't going to say it. But anyway. One of these days, I'm telling you, I was just between the chat rooms and my Skype and that, and Brother Ed there turning me on to that song to begin with. I was just telling him, I said, we can actually do a whole show breaking down that song and everything that's in there. Every time I listen to it and hear it, I pick up something else along the way. It's just phenomenal. If you get a chance to check it out, look it up over there and look on YouTube. It's up there. Pretty good video and all that goes with it as well. Just got to search around. Another comment in chat there. I'll have to double check that information. I think that particular teller may have just made a mistake and misunderstood something, or it's an internal policy. To the best of my knowledge, that has not taken effect, not in my wife's bank anyway. So that was just probably a miscommunication or something else that they're doing internally just for that particular branch, but is not across the board. But we'll definitely, if any new information comes in on that, I will let you know. What they're talking about is cashing a check. And we all know when you cash over, when you have any transaction over a certain amount, they have to do the forms and things like that. And he was, individual was cashing a check, and it wasn't for that very much, actually. It was under $2,000, and they were taking a long time to process it for him. And he had asked about, well, you filling out a form? And they said yes, and anything over a certain dollar amount. And she said yes, anything over $500. Now, first of all, they're not even supposed to give out that information. So that right there tells you that it's not a across-the-board kind of deal. It must be pertaining just to that branch. Or it was a new teller who totally misunderstood something altogether. So you just have to, but if anything like that comes across, you know me, guys, I'll always check it out for you. Not a problem. All right, getting back, we've had a couple of things that were taking place here in the chat room as that was being played, and it was pretty interesting because it all does tie in together with what the judge was saying, what's taking place, and things like that. It used to be a rule of thumb, not something necessarily written, that you let the penalty equal the crime, okay? And we've gotten away from that. That was like old school, and for some reason we have gotten away from that, and we've gotten away from it so badly, or so far, or whatever word you want to use. It just makes me sick when I see some of this stuff that they got coming down the pike that the government uses to make a point, if you will. And what I'm referring to is the Amish community. Now, some people would say, well, I thought they weren't under the jurisdiction. Well, actually, a lot of the Amish community, although they don't have any other documentations, birth certificates, driver's license, bank accounts, etc., they don't have a lot of that kind of stuff. Most of them, though, do have Social Security numbers. They have that because of the business purposes, I would assume. We did interviews a couple of years back. I will see if I can find them here on Freedom Reigns. I have to get with Diatra on that. We actually were interviewing some of the Amish girls, and they were explaining they had gotten out of the community, and they were explaining how it all works from their end of things. So, of course, just by having that Social Security number, that puts you under the 14th Amendment jurisdiction. And this particular incident was on I'm sure people by now have heard about it, was on the hair cutting incident, the hair and beard cutting. What made me sick wasn't so much that they did wrong, but that the government got involved to prove, to break up the community, really, to try to, show an upper hand or force. I don't know where their thinking is on this. Usually I'm pretty good at figuring out what are the government trying to accomplish here with their, evil ways, if you will. And this one I just can't wrap my mind around it. I don't see any other reason than just trying to break up the community or to force them to a new area. Because they did that in PA. So many of the Amish communities that were all at one time all over, especially throughout Lancaster and all over Pennsylvania, have packed up and moved out because Pennsylvania started to become harassing to them, starting to be a real pain in the ass, if you will, for a bunch of BS. So they were packing up and heading further and further north, looking for land and whatnot to do their thing so they can live in peace. I mean, that's all everybody really wants to do is just live in peace. Leave me the hell alone. I'm not bothering you. Don't friggin' come over and bother me. But that's not good enough. That doesn't work for They being whoever, the government elites, or whatever name you want to put there. But really got me disgusted. It wasn't so much that, hey, yeah, they were penalized for doing something. First of all, they didn't break any statute laws. They didn't break any written laws. What they broke was a religious law, which is seen as an attack, okay? And yes, they classified it as a hate crime. But really what it it should have been handled by the community, by the Amish community, by their religious guidelines, if you will. You know, the code that they live by. But okay, so classify it as a hate crime. They didn't murder anybody. They didn't rape anybody. They didn't rob anybody or stab anybody or any of the other things that might happen in normal society. They did it to prove a point. It was a conflict of interest within the group itself, the individual group. All right. Yes, the group made a mistake. They handled it poorly, but hey, that happens. It's a family. All right. These are large, interwoven type families, folks. It's a personal, domestic matter. And to get wrapped up into this with the federal government, this isn't even good. This went to federal. Keep in mind, they cut the hair and they cut the beard off of the this other group. And I'm going to read some of this because it baffles me. Now, this one took place over in Ohio. Bare feet and work boots shuffle on the wooden floor of the Amish schoolhouse as the children settle into tight rows of scuffed metal desks across the room from their parents. The men on one set of benches, women on another, some cradling young children. They've gathered to celebrate the end of school, but no one claps or cheers. The only voices raised are those of the students as they begin singing. The melody is rising and dipping like the surrounding hills. A warm breeze carries religious lyrics, mostly in German, through the open windows and over the fields where families were mingled afterwards. The ceremony is typically in late April, but this school year was cut short to allow some youngsters a few more days of family time before their parents leave for federal prison. Come Friday, 4 women and 1 man from this tight-knit group in rural eastern Ohio will enter the prison system in various states, joining 9 already behind bars on hate crimes, convictions for hair and beard cutting attacks against a fellow Amish. That timing made Tuesday's event the last big gathering before the 5 departed. And the participants gave the Associated Press a rare glimpse into their largely insular community. Men played baseball in button shirts, work boots, and blue pants with suspenders. Their wives, some barefoot, sat outdoors on benches from the schoolhouse, chatting as their long-sleeved blue and green dresses and white headscarves fluttered in the wind. Their children snacked and relaxed nearby, dressed like smaller versions of their parents. It's a happy day on the outside, but not on the inside. On the inside, a lot of times we're crying. But we have to keep our spirits up for the children's sake, said Martha Mullet, whose husband, Sam Mullet Sr., was accused of orchestrating the hair-cutting attacks and was sentenced to 15 years, the longest prison term of the 16 defendants in the case. In case you didn't hear that, let that sink in a minute, folks. 15 years for cutting someone's hair. They would have been better off murdering the damn people, and they would have gotten a shorter sentence. But I'm going to continue. She said she believes the government is trying to split up the community, but members are determined to ensure the survival of the breakaway group her husband found it. Those who were attacked alleged he led in authoritarian style, and at least one person described it as a cult where members' minds were programmed in the wrong way by Sam Mullet. Mullet's family denounces that description. Such communities typically limit interaction with news media, but members of Mullet's group in Bergholz said they were willing to talk because they feel they've been treated unfairly by the justice system. The Amish, who sun many facets of modern life, are deeply religious and believe the Bible instructs women to let their hair grow long and men to grow beards and stop shaving once they marry, which means cutting the hair would be shameful and offensive. Prosecutors brought hate crime charges because they said they believed the attacks were spurred by religious differences. The defendants don't deny the hair cuttings. Some say they regret what happened. Others don't, but contend they stem from family disputes that should have been handled internally. They say they're bound by different rules guided by their religion, that the government had no business getting involved in what they did, and that calling it a hate crime was overreaching. We're not exactly saying it was wrong, and we don't say it's right either. It's something that will never happen again, I can tell you that. Wilma Mullet, a daughter of Sam Mullet. She was not among those charged. All 16 defendants appealed, arguing the group's conviction, sentencing, and imprisonment in separate facilities as far away as Louisiana, Minnesota, and Connecticut violates constitutional rights and amounts to cruel and unusual punishment. Prosecutors reject that argument. The defendants say the distance to the facilities is too great to travel by horse-drawn buggy or even by using a hired driver, so most of their families likely won't be able to visit. They plan to keep in touch through letters and occasional phone calls. The 5 reporting to prison Friday said that they are somewhat scared and unsure what to expect, but are hopeful about being released early for good behavior. They're sewing clothes, plowing ground, and finishing other chores to make life easier for their loved ones while they're gone. 2 women assigned to prisons in Minnesota were bracing for their first plane ride. Their departure will leave nearly 3 dozen children without one or both parents in a culture where the men and women have distinct roles, so the adults made alternative arrangements. Linda and Emmanuel Shockrock's oldest children will look after the younger ones while the Shockrocks are imprisoned over the next 2 years. The spouses of Anna Miller and Freeman Burkholder and the 15 children combined from the 2 families will act as one household, while Miller and Burkholder serve 1-year sentences. The spouses are brother and sister, and the children are all cousins. Lavina Miller is beginning a similar sentence and giving Martha Mullet custody of her 8 children until she returns, because her husband is in Massachusetts on 7-year sentence. Before the trial, the Amish rejected plea agreements that offered leniency and might have helped young mothers avoid prison. Several said Tuesday that they rejected deals either because they didn't want to admit guilt to a hate crime charge or they didn't want to testify against Mullet Sr. and say things they don't believe. The community members say they're working together to ensure the group preserves by handling chores that would have been the responsibility of the incarcerated members. The remaining men especially bear the burden of extra work, making home repairs, fixing fences, and handling planting and harvesting. A 19-year-old grandson has taken over running Sam Mullet's 700-acre farm. It's hard, but I'm still surprised we can do as good as we do. said Emma Miller, who leaves Friday for a prison in West Virginia. She and the other new inmates also face big changes as they adjust to prison life. The women can wear jumper dresses, and they hope to continue wearing headscarves. Under the prison rules, the men can keep their beards. You can read more about the case and that ordeal and what's going on. But I need to take a short break here and pull myself together. And we're back. Yes, I'm reading the chats. When you look at the Amish community, it's what we all want. What we all should be reaching for and striving for. That's why it's so important to forget about the hype, forget about the BS, forget about what they are up to. We need to get back to community, rebuilding our households. For once, making the right decisions. And claim that self-responsibility. Get out there and get close with nature again. It's a beautiful world out there. And sometimes it's hard to see through all the madness that's taken place. But it's not impossible. You can turn your back on that madness. But you can't do it alone. It takes a community, not unlike that of the Amish. Get out there and work the soil. Plant the seed. Harvest the crops. It's beneficial in so many ways. Not only does it save you money, not only are you going to put real food on the dinner table, your health is going to improve. Your heart will become a little lighter and won't feel so burdened with all the madness that's taken place. And everyone can do it, folks. It's not that difficult. Whether you're in a small apartment, just growing out of a pot. It's something you helped bring into this world. Without your hands, that seed would have never been planted. That tree or vegetable or fruit would have never grown. And you would never received the reward that it gives you in return in so many ways. You need to wake up. We need to pray for those people, that they're going to be okay. They don't know what it's like in the real world. They have no idea really what they're going to be faced with. And for a community that is that tightly woven together to be separated from that, for just the briefest of time, even just a few days, a few weeks, is literally torture on that individual. And I think that's the other reason why the government housed them in different prisons, because they don't want them to have that comfort, if you will, of being housed with others and to not be in reach of your family on the outside. Just hope everybody keeps them in their hearts and just thinks about what's going on. Did they do wrong? Sure. But we don't know all the circumstances. We don't know why those particular individuals were chosen. We don't know what rules or guidelines they broke within that tight-knit community, and we'll probably never know. But either way, nobody's dead here, folks. But this is what our government's doing to us. We're past our top of the hour. How about that? All right, let's see if I can change gears here a little bit. The other thing that came up in the chat room tonight, we were talking about the 13th Amendment. And I went over this once before in the past. The so-called missing 13th Amendment. Let me be more clear here. Not the one you know about today. And it was just a question of whether or not, they weren't sure if it was even, I guess looking for individuals looking for proof that it was actually real. And they did come across that proof. Yes, it is real. It was passed by Congress May 1st in 1810. It was ratified December 9th in 1812. And it reads as such: if any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall, without the consent of Congress, accept and retain any present, pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States and shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit under them, or either of them. Now, hopefully you picked up on some of the words. Remember, this is the 13th Amendment. This precedes the evil 14th Amendment that usurped the status of citizen and made everyone United States citizens. Well, if this happened prior the 14th Amendment, at this time in history, the United States didn't have any citizens. So the whole entire thing is null and void. It doesn't exist. It says, if any citizen of the United States shall accept blah, 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 blah. Hello? In 1812, there was no such thing as a United States citizen. It's the trickery in the words, folks. But that's okay. Because then it goes on to say, what we're talking about is a title here. This was all put together and had a purpose, just simply so nobody can be bribed in Congress. But if you did, then no such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States. Well, friggin' A, sign me up. Where do I sign? Boy, that simplifies our process of expat real easy, don't it? Just let me sign up under a king and emperor, give me an honorary title. Boom. I'm no longer a citizen of the United States. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. But now we're going to go a little bit further and deeper into this and why it didn't matter anyway. It's still officially on the books. It was never done away with. It was printed in multiple different documents, different constitutions that all went all around the states at the time, the different countries at the time, because by law they have to post it. Not only was it posted, it was actually printed at several different printing presses around the Union at the time. The other reason why, first of all, it doesn't matter is because they're talking about emperors, kings, prince, and foreign powers. How come they didn't throw in there the bribery of the lobbyist, the oil company? Because those aren't foreign powers. The other reason why it doesn't matter, if it was still fully printed today, blah, 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 okay? The thing in question is any title of nobility or honor. Now, people say, well, that's attorneys and your doctors. No. And nothing to do with that. A title of nobility and honor, as if you were getting from the emperor, the king, the prince, or wherever, from a foreign power, right? When the queen knights you as Sir David Meola, ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. That is a title of nobility and or honor. So again, it doesn't matter. It was all just so you would not be influenced, or bribed by an outside source. But we're going to go one step further. Let's say, like everybody's big misconception here of it all, that it meant any kind of title, doctors, attorneys, blah, 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 blah. Because this is usually the misconception of this whole thing. Because they consider a judge or an attorney or, a doctor an honor, a title of honor. Okay. Well, okay, but who are they being bribed by? Because this is all about bribery, folks. This has nothing to do with the title. It's just to keep out any kind of bribery from an outside source. But you can have all the inside bribery you want. So let's say it was the titles that people think it is. Your doctors, your lawyers, your attorneys, so on and so forth. Today, I'm Attorney Meola. That's my job. I have my own law, or I'm practicing law in some firm, whatever. Now I get elected to Congress. Am I still Attorney David Meola? No. Now I'm Congressman David Meola. I'm no longer working and operating as a attorney. Okay? This is why it was not needed, folks. Didn't pertain to the people you thought it pertained to, first of all. And secondly, when you change your job title changes. This is why they talked about outside influences, not inside influences. So because of the wording of citizen being used, that kind of was a let the cat out of the bag kind of deal. Now, wait a minute, anybody with aim, back then they studied law, in every household. There was 2 books found in every house. That was the Bible and the law book. That was on the shelf of every single home across the Union, folks. They knew it. they were taught it. It was taught in the classrooms, in the little barns, everywhere. That's what was taught. And if they had saw this word, citizen of the United States, well, what the hell is that? I'm not a citizen of the United States. Back then, remember, 14th Amendment didn't come into play. I'm a citizen of Florida. What the hell are they talking about? So they kind of had to let that one go away before they can bring in the Reconstruction Acts, which gave you the way out, the only lawful path on the, to get out from the de facto system and remain in the de jure system. Before they created the new government, the new citizens. And that's the wording in it, folks. That's what they're talking about. It's not that the one went away. They coexist side by side. With your silence is part of consent. Or consent by filling out the forms. Checking, yes, I'm a U.S. citizen. Right? It didn't happen overnight. It took generations of brainwashing to get everybody to this point. But that was the building blocks to get it all going. So as you can see, that the missing 13th Amendment, even if it was still in print and there, really had no effect whatsoever on how things are ran in Congress. It was just a way to prevent the early onset of any form of bribery or influence from an outside source. The question is, does making an oath to bar entail an allegiance of sort? You can have allegiance to many things. You can have allegiance to your wife. You can have an allegiance to your children. Okay? You can have an allegiance to your country. When you take an oath, depending on the wording of the oath, you're not, the oath that they're taking is, first of all, an attorney doesn't have to do that. The bar, as people like to refer to as the British Accredited Registry, which actually it's not, it simply means the right to have a true voice on the other side of the bar. When you walk into a courtroom, there's that bar that separates the people in the audience from the tables where your prosecutors and district attorneys and defendants and all that would sit, and your juries and whatnot. It just gives an official voice to speak from the inside of the bar by crossing that bar. But the bar is nothing more than that wooden entry, if you will, to go past the barrier. Okay. But that's what it's referring to. It allows you in there. But you don't have to join the bar at all. That is a voluntary action. You can practice law. You can go to law school. You can practice law. You can do everything above. Be fully licensed without joining the bar. The bar is, that people refer to as the bar, is a actual private club, and only attorneys can join. But there's no law saying they have to join the bar in order to practice. Hope that helps answer your question. You would actually have to look. I could look it up for you and bring that information. What the actual oath is, for the so-called bar oath, if you will. It's probably I've never read one, ever looked at it, because I know it's a private club, members only, and you have to be an attorney to join, but you don't have to, and still be an attorney, still practice law, just like the individual person can represent themselves, and represent themselves from the inside of the bar, if you will, or across the bar, or whatever you want to call it, the barrier. So there's nothing more than a fancy club for a bunch of overpaid, rotten scumbag lawyers. Just to put it in there at you. But yeah, you can see it printed. It's just in the wording, and it really had nothing to do what it was all about. Same website where I was reading that from. Discussion over the years about the members of the Bar Association from practicing in government offices. Remember, again, it has nothing to do with any internal titles or sources. It is strictly, from outside influence. Oh, there we go. Oh, just got an update. The bar mean the separation between law and court procedure that comes from an attorney. Hope that helps. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the input. Anytime you want to call in, call on in, please. But yeah, they're talking about title and nobility of being Esquire. And those people had to join the International Bar Association or the International Bankers Association and owed their allegiance to the King of England. Banning titles of nobility began in the Articles of Confederation, continued in 2 places in the Constitution, and finally was added as an amendment to the Constitution. An amendment that was needed as the other bans had no teeth in them to punish those persons who choose to ignore the constitutional law. Legislation in several states by the 11th Congress, second session, 1st May 1810. That's when it was finally ratified. April 30th, 1812, Louisiana became the 18th state in the Union, but is not consulted on the pending constitutional amendment, although Louisiana recognized the validity of the 13th Amendment by publishing the Constitution in its law books in 1825 and again in 1855. June 12, 1812, the War of 1812 begins. June 12, 1812, Governor Plummer of New Hampshire sends a letter to New Hampshire legislature, accompanied by letters from the Chief Executive Office of Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and Vermont, indicating ratification of the 13th Amendment by their state. Virginia, thus, is shown to have properly ratified the amendment. Discounting the letter from Governor Plummer of New Hampshire also requires that the Senate record from New Hampshire also be discarded. There is no bias under which any reasonable argument can be proposed whereby it can be shown that both the governor and the Secretary of the Senate were both lying. Even if the New Hampshire information is wrong, Virginia printed a copy of the Constitution showing the 13th Amendment in its law books in 1819. This date is the date, if no earlier date can be confirmed. December 9th, 1812, New Hampshire ratifies the 13th Amendment, the 13th of the 13 states required. It was complete December 9th, 1812. There you go, folks. There's the history on the 13th, the original 13th Amendment. Now, it does say, to further hide their unlawful actions. It's very interesting to note that only the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th articles of the amendment had numbers assigned to them at the time of ratification. The reason behind the numbering was to ensure that the removal of the validity existing 13th Amendment was fully hidden by the proposed and wrongfully numbered new 13th Amendment. To have just numbered the new proposed amendment as the 13th and then not numbered by others would have called attention to the facts surrounding the situation. Whoever was behind the removal of the valid 13th Amendment had to number the next few amendments so as to further hide their unlawful actions. Pretty clear. But yeah, you can search the web on this, folks. There's tons of information out on there. It was just like many things hidden away, as always. I don't have any callers. We got a half hour left here. And I'm checking over the chat to see what kind of questions we have. I was hoping we'd have a caller tonight. Trying to encourage somebody to call in here. Oh, no, come on. Pick up the phone. You know you want to. I'm just busting a couple of my Skype listeners out there. Just like in the chat room, you guys are always chatting away for me and giving me all this great questions instead of, which is fine. And sometimes I miss them. So that's why I'm trying to break you guys to habit and call in. Ask the question. Let's have a little two-way conversation. So I don't have to keep pausing to read the questions and stuff in the chat. Make it a little easier for me and a little bit more fun, I think, for all of you as well. I think that covers all our topics tonight, except for growing, of course. I was really hoping last 30 minutes, if nothing else, this board is going to light up. I was hoping to cover a little bit on the herb gardens because that's one of my projects for this weekend. And it's something you guys can all do. It's easy enough. Doesn't take up a whole lot of room. It's probably, maximum size you would ever want is, 6 by 6. And that's huge for an herb garden. But a couple of things you want to look into. You're going to use them for all your sauces and meals that you may make. And it's great to have something fresh out of the garden. And it's something you don't have to worry about. You don't have to do it inside. You can do it outside, full sun, or partial shaded is fine. It grows all year round for the most part. Take care of yourself, brother. Be safe out there. There's a big, huge storm rolling up in through Georgia. So yeah, that's why I didn't get my a call in tonight to help me out with this. For all you people up there coming up out of the Florida here, going to enter into the Georgia and Alabama areas and whatnot, you got a really big storm front blowing through. I'm sure they've been telling you about it all day, if not the last couple of days. So batten down the hatches. It's on its way, gang. It blew through here this afternoon. I'm in that void. It can be going nuts, even in the middle of a hurricane. Everything can go nuts a couple of miles away from me. It passed over me on the way way up north there today. And, we got caught in a downpour. It lasted all 10 minutes, and then the sun was back out, and 15 minutes later, everything was dry again. So, it's just my location. What can I tell you? Said everybody else within a couple of miles from me, all kinds of hell breaks loose. Me, nothing. So, anyway, a couple of things I want you to put on your list there. If you're going to do an herb garden. And, of course, there's different types of mints and thymes out there. My understanding is basil, lemon thyme, apple mint, dill. What am I saying, Steve? Dill, stevia, Stevia, forgive my pronunciations, oregano, of course, and garlic and shallots. Those are the most common herbs to grow. The beauty about it is there's only 2 of them that you have to replant every year. The rest, once planted, you got to leave it alone, let it go, and all year long you'll have fresh garden herbs. You can do this inside as well, but if you do, make sure you have a grow light of some sort to help you just get a much better growth out of it, more production, more yield, and of course, enhances probably the flavor a little bit as well. But it's real easy to do. You can do it in a window box. You can do it, in a small garden off the side of your driveway, anywhere. Just about anywhere you can grow anything. If you can get a bucket full of soil, you can grow. Don't limit yourself. Use coffee cans. Yeah, really. I have lawn and leaf bags full of Folger coffee cans, empty Folger coffee cans. Never know what you're going to use it for. You'd be surprised what you can do with those things. Just get yourself some of them. A couple of those, and you're good to go. If you're doing canning, and something that I'm learning about, I'm really getting into. I'm taking all the classes, all the information I can get on it, watching everything I can, because that's what I plan on doing with most of my yield. Getting all my canning stuff going. And we really love pickled just about anything in this house. Yeah, pickled eggs, pickled tomatoes, cucumbers, you name it. Well, I was told that if you're going to do pickling, the one thing you definitely want to make sure you plant a lot of is dill. Okay, so dill is the key ingredient that if you're going to do any kind of growing for pickling, that you're going to actually plant a very large amount of. Especially if your family's like me, like mine, we can go through one of those giant jars of pickles in under a week without blinking an eye. I mean, the kids, just every time you turn around, they will snack on pickles all day long if I let them. Hey, there's nothing wrong with it. They're good for you. They're healthy. Knock themselves out, man. They can, that's a lot better, and rather have them chowing down on pickles or pickled eggs or whatever than out there sitting down in front of a television chowing down on a bag of chips loaded with grease and crap. God only knows what the hell else is in it with all the preservatives. But get yourself a garden, start growing, make your own potatoes. Boom. Homemade potato chips, nothing better. Several ways to do them as well. You can find that information out there on the web. We've tried, at least 3 or 4 different ways of making them. Still don't really haven't come up with a favorite, and we haven't perfected the technique, if you will. But hey, even in the microwave, they come out pretty good, surprisingly. If you follow the directions you can find online there, making homemade potato chips, even using a microwave, kind of cheating doing it that way. But they're not bad. They're really not. So just something to think about. Dehydrating. Anything. Get yourself a dehydrator. When price is low or the particular fruits are in season, whether bananas, boom. Great, healthy snack. Once they're dehydrated, they'll last you forever. You can put them in a bag, stick them up in a cabinet somewhere, and you got fresh banana chips. Anything you could think of. You're only limited to your imagination and, of course, the equipment you have on hand. These are just a few of the ideas that we're considering and the things that we're doing here in the Meola household. This weekend, my plan is to get out there and get my 5th row. Oh, boy. I got a 5th row I got to be tilling over. That's where I'm going to be getting all my potatoes put into. And some more onion. I got about 85 purple onions, or red onions, I guess they're called, planted out there all around, all the rows, everywhere. It's good to help keep the bugs and stuff away as well. I got about 80 of them, about 80 of those out there, planted, see what I can get out of those. And I'm waiting on, because everybody's out of stock right now, I'm waiting on getting the Texas sweets. I want to get them in the ground too this year. And I got my potatoes, got my eyes growing on my little reds. Yep. Got my eyes going, waiting for them to get a little bit bigger, and then I'll be cutting that potato up into chunks and planting that throughout that new row that I'm cutting in. And I'll get potatoes from that all year. I'll go out there, want a couple of potatoes, baked potato, whatever the case may be. Want to make French fries? Boom, just go out to the garden, grab my pitchfork, a couple of quick shifting through there. Boom, voila. Got myself fresh grown potatoes to do whatever my little heart desires with. And they'll just keep growing and growing and growing, folks. No worries there. And then, of course, I want to cut my herb garden in. I got to till all that, clean that up, and get ready to put the good soil down. and get ready to set up the herb garden. I'm doing mine outside along the front of my house instead of putting, flowers and decorative stuff out in the front of your house. Build yourself an herb garden out there. It's decorative. Things are growing. They look beautiful. They look wonderful. Right? And it's something you can eat. It's something you can utilize every day, and it'll give you yields all year long. It doesn't matter, summer, winter, spring, fall. Right? Herbs are great in that aspect. Like I said, there's only 2 of those that you'll have to replant, and I didn't give you the names for the only reason is I don't want to quote you the wrong ones, but I believe basil was one of them, and I can't remember what the other one was that you would have to replant every year. Other than that, nope. Yeah, we just let them go. Let them rock and roll. You'll get plenty of fresh seasonings all year round. So that's my plan for the weekend. Hope you guys are out there and planning the same or something similar, getting your hands dirty, dig into some of that nice rich soil and get yourself something growing. It feeds your body and your soul. And there's nothing better than that. Over the weekends, try to put the BS behind you guys. Don't focus on all the craziness. Enjoy the weather. If it's nice out, that time of year, it's time to start cleaning off the barbecues. And, of course, I use mine all year round. But it's time for many people to clean up and wash off the barbecue grills and get ready for whatever gathering events that may take place. Don't forget to think about doing a block party, even if you're the first person to put it together. Get with your neighbors. Hey, look, this weekend there's nothing going on. Nobody's going away. It could be a long weekend or something. How about we all put together a block party? We pull the tables and the grills down to the end of the driveways. The kids can all play outside. We grab our lawn chairs, sit around, grill up some hot dogs and hamburgers, nothing fancy. Somebody can make some potato salad. Another person can, might not be handy in the kitchen, can bring, potato chips and pretzels and a case of soda or something. Keep everybody cheap, under a budget, a couple of dollars from everybody. And you'd be surprised where you never know where it may lead to. I know in some areas that have started up these kind of things that over the years they become a main event. They do it once a year, they throw a block party, and they get people coming from, 20, 30 miles away to come to this one-day event. One of the counts, I think Beatrice was telling me, is actually Beatrice one of the ones that started this, and her little community there. She was part of the original starting of that. I think one year she was telling me they were up to a head count of almost 300 people at their block party. So again, you don't know till you try. You get out there and just do it. That's what it's all about, folks. Don't wait for somebody else. If you wait for somebody else, hey, it might not ever happen. Take the initiative. Be responsible for yourself. Don't blame everybody else. Look at that reflection in the mirror and say, it's time for a change. I'm the one that's at fault. They got me this far. I'm going to be the one that's going to make me successful going further. Okay? Forget about the past. Forget about those mistakes. Forget about the brainwashing, the indoctrination, the me. Forget about all that crap. Look in that mirror. Look at that reflection honestly and say, that was yesterday. Today's a new day. Turn over a new leaf. Start letting people in. Start being responsible. With that being said, I don't see any more questions in the chat room. I need to go over video in there. Thanks. Please check that out after. There you go. A couple of videos being posted over here in the Freedom Range chat room. If you get a chance, please check it out. Chris is talking about a movie. He's posted a link for that, and that is Back to Eden, the film. You can go to back-to-Eden-film, all in one word.com, and check that out. I guess that's definitely one of your favorites. Is that the one with Chris O'Donnell, or whatever her name is? Rosie O'Donnell, rather, or something, Chris? Waiting for a response, just to be sure. I don't know, she did a real weird kind of movie long time ago. Remember seeing it once, and the damn thing still stuck with me as a nightmare, I think, more so than anything useful. I don't remember. Oh, boy. I'm getting tired. Little sleep last night. I hope you guys enjoyed this evening's show. I know I love bringing the shows to you each and every week. Be safe out there if you're caught out in those storms. Batten down the hatches, if you will, till it blows over. If you do nothing else, go out and get yourself a house plant, folks. Preferably something you can eat, because that's what it's all about. Because we all need to, besides looking at the reflection in the mirror, we need to face those problems head on. Jack Gladstone, everybody, please give him a look up over there on the YouTube and his also his own webpage. Tons of information, great music, and great CDs. Great place to just go stop in and take a look. Anyway, back to that. back-to-Edenfilm.com. All kidding aside, folks, it's available in English and Spanish. A little background on it. Back to Eden shares the story of one man's lifelong journey, walking with God and learning how to get back to the simple, productive methods of sustainable provisions that were given to man in the Garden of Eden. The organic growing system that has resulted from Paul, I'm going to destroy his name, so I'll just spell it, Gautschi, incredible experiences has garnered the interest of visitors from around the world. However, never until now have Paul's methods been documented and shared like this. As a part of the mission to freely give and freely receive, the makers of Back to Eden has agreed to stream the full featured film online for free. And you can find it at that link, folks. It looks great, very interesting, very excited. I'm actually going to watch that after tonight's show. It looks like it's an hour and 43 minutes long. It's also done in HD, which is always a great plus. So, yeah, definitely, if you get a chance, head on over there to that website. That's back-to-Edenfilm.com. Check it out, because I know I will. Anywho, well, we're coming to the wrap-up of tonight's show. I want to thank everybody, as always, for joining me here each and every week, and especially our listeners who I know cannot join us on air tonight or in the chat room because they're on the road. Thanks, as always, gang, especially those who are checking us out in the archives over there on the Blog Talk Radio chat rooms. A bunch of guests have been there. Thank you as well for joining us here this evening. If you guys log in, you can actually utilize the chat feature there, and I'll be able to respond to any questions that you may have. With that being said, I'm going to play one last song to take us out for the evening, and that will end our broadcast for today. Until next time, everyone, God bless, be safe,